Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about feminist theory and its strengths and its weaknesses. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is marginalized groups, which are basically groups that are excluded from participation in society due to power imbalances. So, for example, women, because there's a power imbalance, sometimes we're excluded from certain things, for example, politics. Well, not anymore, but we've all heard the phrase that a woman can't be president because she's too temperamental. That is discrimination against women because that's assuming that, and that's stereotyping that women are temperamental when in reality, most of us know very calm women. So it's not a truthful statement to make. So that's a marginalized group. So the next question is, can everybody feel the oppression? Can everybody be oppressed from the marginalized groups, or does everybody feel that oppression? Whenever the group of people in the marginalized groups are starting to be pushed aside or cast aside, regardless of their concerns, regardless of what they bring to the table, they're just not taken into consideration. That's when people are being oppressed. So when someone is not taken into consideration, in all honesty, not everyone is going to experience the same level of oppression. Not everyone is going to experience like any symptoms because of the oppression, like substance use or depression or anxiety or trauma or PTSD. Not everyone is going to experience it because not everyone feels that oppression. So an example is me. I was actually born and raised in Mexico, but I don't have the same level of oppression that other people from the same race have because my dad's dad was white, and so I'm white passing. So my level of oppression is not the same as someone who is not white passing. So there are levels. And if taken into consideration, feminist theory, feminist theory takes everything, all these factors, and so saying they talk about disparities in implementation occur when interventions like treatment delivery significantly undermines access, quality, or outcomes for certain populations compared to others. This is what Singh says. So again, if you are like a white therapist seeing a black man, maybe you don't give them the same level of importance as you would a white client, or maybe you see them as like you see them as part of the problem type deal. So that could be, so that is oppression, but it occurs significantly when people are in marginalized groups. Marginalization could be anywhere from being a woman to your cultural background to traumas that you've experienced, your gender, sexual orientation. So all of these things come into play when it comes to being on marginalized groups, and whether or not you feel oppressed. Not everyone does. Okay, so moving on to the strengths. If I can change the slide, here we go. Okay, so some of the strengths. First is that it's multicultural. The good thing about it being multicultural is that it takes into consideration where the client is coming from. This is important because not every client is going to experience the same thing. Like I said, I'm white passing Mexican, so I don't experience the same level of discrimination as someone that might be a darker skin color or might experience their level of discrimination. So another example, have you guys ever heard those people or the videos of the people telling Hispanics to be like, speak English? This is America. Well, actually, America doesn't have a national language, so it doesn't actually matter that this is America. We're kind of a melting pot. So the strength So someone that speaks Spanish or only Spanish doesn't have the same level of discrimination as someone who also speaks English. So this is multicultural. The theory is multicultural, and it takes into consideration all these factors and more. Another strength is the theory is that it is an advocate for social justice. So what does this mean? It means that we want to see change. We're not actually with the social norm. So we not only do we implement change in our personal lives, but we want to encourage advocacy from our clients so then they can advocate for themselves and for the people that are different from them, for everyone really. Because we want social justice, the social justice piece, to be prevalent when it comes to, or it is prevalent when it comes to this theory. Another strength is that a lot of people think that men are being excluded from feminist theory, when in reality, they're actually very welcomed with open arms, because the more exposure people get of their differences, the better they understand their privilege. So if a white man comes into therapy and sees me, a Mexican therapist, I can explain how it feels to be told, hey, speak English, this is America. Or I can explain how it sounds or feels when say you can't do this because you're temperamental. So it's like opening the eyes of men, so they're actually very welcome. And Khan actually mentions this, states this, informing them that we want the change to be made, right? So we want, again, social justice. That's what Corey states. Also, women in ethics. Corey states that women are being more included in ethics committees for a change. Well, as of, late. So then we have more variety people rather than, stuffy old white men that don't see anything wrong with what they do. So we are getting more women in ethics committees, and that's another strength. Another one is bringing the theory to the real world. And this one is very important. It's awareness. So we try to bring awareness to everyone. No one is excluded. We want change for the betterment of people, but all people, not just specific people. Not keeping specific people like billionaires just rich and happy. We want food security, right? We want black men to stop being killed by the police. We want all these different types of changes that are important. So this awareness piece comes very handy from the theory and pushes us forward. So then we're not stuck in the Middle Ages. Okay, so some of the weaknesses. Some of the weaknesses are Jordy and Trotman say that few counselors are actually familiar with the theory. A lot of them shy away from the theory simply because they hear feminist theory and they're like, a woman that hates all men. And that's not the case. We advocate for everyone, including men, because there are men being oppressed too, because they're told, men are sometimes told, don't show your emotions, or don't cry, don't talk about your feelings. And it's like, no, we want men to be able to talk about their feelings. We want men to be able to express themselves, not in a harmful way, but still express themselves. So another weakness of the theory is that Brown states that there are stereotyped roles. So these roles sometimes get pushed aside or get looked down on. So, for example, if a woman wants to be a housewife and wants to raise children and wants to have the stereotypical female experience, sometimes it's not viewed like in the best light, and it's sometimes frowned upon, and that's a problem. That's a problem with the theory. That some people don't take into consideration that some women do want that lifestyle, and some women want to stay home, and that's okay. And some women, want to be strippers, and they want to get paid for dancing and all that good stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. So the stereotype rules of a woman, we have to give the woman the right to choose. And so the stereotype roles are harmful to the theory, and those people that keep these stereotype roles and maybe look down on them or anything like that, we just have to give the opportunity for people to make their own decisions. Another weakness is that there are some women, according to Corey, who don't share the same priorities. I've seen this more in Republican women who don't want to see change. They're like, make America great again. And it's like, wait a minute, America's not perfect. So it's never been perfect, and we want to advocate for change. And there are certain women that don't want any change. And there's this show, for example, there's this show called Superstore, and there's an old lady there that when a woman manager comes in and starts telling them what to do, she's like, the world is moving too fast. So not everyone wants the change. Another issue with the theory is that sometimes therapists advocate for independence and dependent cultures. So Corey actually talks about in his book, he uses an example of a Vietnamese woman who comes from a collectivist culture. So everyone is in charge of everything. So everybody is part of the decision making. So individualism isn't one of its priorities. So when the Vietnamese woman wants to deviate from her parents' goals for her, so for example, let's say that the parents want her to be a doctor and she wants to be an artist, in this case, the feminist therapists sometimes try and influence their clients to do something that they see fit. So, and that's the next point, bias and influencing clients. That's a problem with it. You can't, as a feminist therapist, we can't tell the client, oh, choose what you want and ignore your parents and ignore your culture. And we can't do that, because we have to take into consideration the Vietnamese woman's culture and background. So we would actually ask, well, what choices do you want? What kind of life do you want? What's going to happen if you make the decision to become an artist and ignore your parents' wishes? All of that is taken into consideration. So independence sometimes doesn't win because of cultural backgrounds. So feminists have to understand that, along with understanding their biases and influencing clients. We have to avoid it because our thought process isn't right in everything. We can't dictate someone's life, and we can't push someone to do something that is frowned upon in their culture. We can support, but we can't push. And lastly, another weakness is that there's no actual credentialing organization. So for example, trauma-focused CBT, there's an actual certification that you can take and training and pay for it, and you get the certification and you can add those letters to your resume. The issue with feminist theory is that it doesn't have that, and anyone could be like, come in and be like, I'm a feminist therapist, and do a terrible job and give feminist therapist like a really bad name. But there's no rules and regulations that are being taught, especially to people in school who want to see change, who want to be a feminist theorist, and there's no guidelines for it. So next thing we want to talk about is how the theory holds up to these three things. So Bepko actually talks about exploring and questioning when it comes to substance use. So as I said in my previous video, it's all about the understanding where the problems are coming from. And sometimes, most of the time, the problems are external. So substance use is a symptom of a bigger problem, and we absolutely have to deal with the substance use, and we deal with the symptoms, but we also take into consideration that this could be a symptom from feeling oppressed and feeling like you don't fit into society, or that you are different and you stick out and you're being pushed aside. And so some people turn to alcohol or drugs. And so we focus on the core issue, which is the feeling of oppression, and then we solve the usage of substance. We we want to stop that, but we also take a look at the bigger issue, right? So, trauma. When it comes to trauma, this theory is great because it takes into consideration the power imbalances that come from trauma. So, for example, if a woman gets sexually assaulted, we discuss not only what happened, right? We discuss the power and the control that was exerted towards this woman that was sexually assaulted. So we discuss it and we see where it's coming from, and it helps with dealing with the trauma. And there's always different types of trauma. My focus is domestic violence and sexual assault. So this theory is just right on the money when it comes to the power imbalance that happens when women, because most of the time women are the ones that are being assaulted. And even though men are assaulted as well, we take into consideration the power imbalance that happens when anybody is being assaulted. The assertion of control and where it's coming from. And then when it comes to diversity, Sue talks about microaggressions and how microaggressions can be a point of contention for many people, because it's like being told, I've heard before, you're pretty for a Mexican. And it's like, wait a minute, why does it have to be for a Mexican? Why can't I just be pretty, right? So these are microaggressions that Sue talks about that happen every day towards all different types of people. And so this theory takes into consideration all of the diversity that's coming from everyone in their background and where everything is coming from. And it takes that and creates solutions. Not necessarily solutions, but like it's safe space for the client to be able to discuss their backgrounds, to discuss their vulnerabilities and their diversity. So this theory is great when it comes to diversity and such. And there are many references. I could not fit them all, but here they are. Or I'm sorry, I couldn't fit them all in like one slide. So here they are, and that's pretty much it. And I will see you guys in class.